Welcome to Moonnest, where every night holds a hidden wonder. It's good to have you here. Tonight's story will lead you through a quiet world of dreams and forgotten places. Listen closely, and stay with us. The next story glows even brighter. There was a place where the sky hung low, not as a burden, nor with storm, but in a hush so deep it seemed to listen. It draped gently across the hills, resting on the old stones and quiet waters of the land. Beneath this sky, softened by mist and time, stood a castle. It was not carved with grandeur nor gilded with gold, but shaped like a memory. Long corridors curved like river bends, and towers leaned slightly, as if they'd grown tired of standing straight. Ivy covered its sides like the careful handwriting of years. The wind was its only inhabitant now, threading itself through hollow arches and forgotten doorways, brushing over broken balustrades and moss-covered stairs. Yet even in silence, the castle did not feel empty. It felt paused. One evening, as the sky dimmed into lavender, a traveler arrived. No horse, no caravan, only a faded coat, a pouch of stones, and a silver ribbon that floated beside them like a thought. They didn't knock. They didn't speak. They only stood before the gate, breathing with the stillness of someone who has not rushed. Then, without a creak, without a groan, the old gate exhaled. It was not a sound, but a sensation, the breath of something ancient and gentle, stirred awake not by command, but by recognition. The moss shifted. The iron sighed. And the doors began to open, not outward, but inward, as though the castle had taken a long inhale, and had finally released it. The travelers stepped forward. Behind them, the sky deepened into dusk, and ahead, the corridor yawned with shadows that did not frighten. The ribbon beside them twirled once in the air, then followed. The first chamber was neither grand nor lit by flame. It held no banners, no crests, no signs of those who had once passed through. But it was not dark. A soft light, like the glow of clouds at dawn, hovered gently along the edges of the stone. Pale columns rose from the ground like trunks of long-forgotten trees, worn smooth by wind. The air tasted of quiet. And there were bells. Hundreds of them, no more, lining the walls in endless vertical rows. Some were small, like thimbles, others large enough to cradle dreams. They were not made of a single metal, but of different hues, pale gold, blued silver, bronze with a hint of sea green. They hung from ribbons, not wires, and none of them rang. Not a single sound. The travelers stepped softly across the floor. Their eyes scanned the bells, curious but unhurried. Each bell was etched with symbols, not letters, not numbers, but delicate strokes that looked like fragments of stories. Some spiraled like smoke, others stretched like rivers, and some curled inward like the closing of a hand. There was no dust. Only stillness. Then, just before they reached the second archway, one bell stirred. It did not chime. It trembled. A whisper of movement, a hush in the silence, as if someone had exhaled near its surface. The thread it hung from shimmered faintly, casting a soft glow onto the floor. And there, just beneath it, the travelers saw a trail. Faint light pulsed along the floor, forming steps that stretched down a long, curved hall. A path made of soft illumination, not magic, not command, but invitation. As if the castle had noticed, and had chosen to remember. Without a word, the traveler followed the light. The path of light meandered, never straight, as if uncertain whether it remembered the way. The traveler followed it with quiet steps, their boots soft against the stone, their ribbon trailing behind like a curious breeze. The corridor curved gently, its walls close and tall, breathing cool air scented faintly with old petals and something sweeter, like rain that had never fallen. There were no torches. No lanterns. The corridor was lit by its own remembering. Here and there, the walls bore alcoves, shallow hollows where small objects sat untouched. A wooden comb with a tooth missing. A stone with an imprint like a thumb. A bundle of dried lavender, wrapped with twine so thin it nearly vanished. The traveler paused at each, drawn not by usefulness but by feeling, as though each object carried a story that had been told only once, then left here to sleep. They touched nothing. Some things were meant only to be seen. And all along the walls, echoes. Not loud. Not recent. Just faint impressions in the air, like words spoken long ago and caught in the folds of silence. A giggle from behind a door. A rustle of robes. A breath. Not ghosts, not quite. More like the castle remembering how it once felt to be full. The traveler paused at one alcove, an empty one. No comb. No trinket. Only a bare stone cradle shaped like a bowl. And though nothing rested inside, it somehow felt heavy. As if something had been there for a very long time and had only just been lifted. The light paused there too. Then moved on. So did the traveler, one step at a time, into the hush of what waited ahead. The passage opened without warning, widening into a chamber that breathed of air and sky. It had no door. Only a velvet curtain, so sheer it moved at the slightest thought, hung in the archway. The traveler brushed it aside and stepped into a space unlike any other they had ever seen. It was shaped like a teardrop, narrow near the entrance, widening toward the back, where a tall window opened not to a view, but to mist. Thick, silver, ever-shifting, the kind that seemed full of memory. The room itself was quiet, save for a soft creaking above. The ceiling moved. Not fast. Not jarring. But slowly, gently, like the pages of a book turning in the wind. Long wooden panels, interlaced with ribbons of pale silk, folded and unfolded in patterns too smooth to follow. They did not open to the sky, not quite. It was as though the ceiling remembered what it was to be sky, and chose to imitate it. The light in the room was ever-changing, not from sun or flame, but from the ceiling itself. Golden one moment, dusky the next. It warmed the traveler's cheeks, then cooled the air as they walked. They looked up, entranced, as the folds shifted again, revealing a glimpse of something far above, a single feather, caught between the panels, floating down. The traveler caught it. It was soft, pale blue, and unnaturally still. As though it had waited a very long time to fall. Turning it in their hand, the traveler noticed something curious. The tip shimmered faintly, pulsing once, then again, in time with the glow that still lined the floor. The castle was guiding them still. But not blindly. It seemed to be asking. They closed their hand around the feather, looked once more at the folding sky above, then followed the light into the next corridor, where a staircase curled like a question, waiting to be answered. The staircase did not rise quickly. It spiraled with patience, its curve wide, its steps shallow, the kind meant not to climb with haste, but to carry a soul upwards in thought. The stone was pale and smooth, worn not by feet alone, but by time itself, polished like riverbed pebbles by centuries of passing silence. The travelers stepped slowly, their hand brushing the outer wall as they ascended. It was cool beneath their fingers, and somehow alive. Not with movement, but with presence. The wall seemed to lean ever so slightly inward, as if to listen, or to offer support without making a fuss of it. The light from the corridor below no longer followed. Instead, the path was lit by delicate threads of glowworm silk that clung to the wall in faint lines, winding upward like vines of starlight. As the traveler climbed, the feather in their palm grew warm, just faintly, like breath against skin. It pulsed once when they reached a narrow landing, and before them opened a small wooden door, rounded at the top like a raindrop. It had no lock. No handle. Only a carved image at its center, a spiral, not unlike the stairs themselves, nestled inside a pair of wings. The traveler stood still. The staircase, though quiet, felt expectant. As though something behind the door had been waiting, not just to be found, but to be recognized. They raised the feather. No wind stirred. No key turned. But at the touch of the feather's tip, the door opened, not outward, nor inward, but gently folding into itself, like a curtain of smoke. The room beyond exhaled a long-forgotten scent, one of parchment, of rain-soaked stone, and something else, the faint fragrance of stillness remembered. The travelers stepped inside. It was a small room, round, with walls that curved inward like the inside of a shell. But it did not feel confined. The air within it moved. Gently. Constantly. As though the room had once known the sky well, and had kept part of it close. The walls were covered in patterns, but not painted or carved. They shifted, ever so subtly, like shadows underwater. One moment, the wall beside the traveler held the soft, swirling image of snow falling through pine boughs. A breath later, it changed, to a breeze ruffling a curtain, to golden rain against glass, to clouds moving slowly over a field of wheat. It was not magic. It was memory. The traveler stepped to the center, where a low pedestal stood, not grand, not ancient, just simple and round, carved from wood worn smooth. Upon it rested a shallow bowl, filled not with water, but with light. It shimmered, fluid and golden, like sunlight caught in honey. The feather in their hand pulsed once, and the bowl responded, not with words, but with an image rising from its surface, a meadow. Familiar. Not from maps or stories, but from somewhere within the traveler's heart. A place they had never seen, and never forgotten. The wind in the room sighed. Around them, the walls shifted again, now showing the same meadow, bathed in a different season with every breath. Spring mist. Summer shimmer. Autumn hush. Winter frost. The room did not ask questions, nor demand answers. It only remembered, and offered those memories as gifts. The traveler closed their eyes. They stayed there a while, listening to the silence of rain that was not falling, and watching the wind that had no weight. Outside the door, the stair waited. And somewhere deeper in the castle, something softly awakened. When the traveler stepped once more onto the staircase, the wind met them, not strong, but present. A breeze, cool and low, curled around their ankles and rose like a whispered greeting, brushing the hem of their coat and lifting the silver ribbon in a slow spiral. It did not rush them. It simply moved with them, as though it, too, had waited for this descent. For now, the staircase no longer rose. It turned downward, gently, endlessly, spiraling like a thought returning to its source. Each step held a hush. Not silence, exactly, but the soft pressure of quiet, the kind that gathers beneath tree canopies just before rain. And with every turn, the light changed, fading from gold to something cooler, more blue, like the first shade that falls after twilight. On the walls, new alcoves appeared, but these held no trinkets. Instead, they held shadows. Not dark or menacing, but memories, softened by time. One showed the outline of someone dancing, alone, under moonlight. Another flickered with the shape of hands planting seeds into soil. Still another held only the faint glimmer of tears falling into a cup. The traveler passed each slowly. They did not linger. But once, just once, they paused before a shadow that mirrored their own height, their own frame, reaching out a hand toward something not there. The feather pulsed again. They moved on. Downward still, until the steps gave way to a room that breathed differently, not with wind, but with something warmer. A deep stillness. A gentle invitation. The ribbon curled ahead, eager. The traveler stepped through the arch, into the softest light yet. The chamber opened like a sigh, wide, round, and filled with a hush that made the heart slow. Its walls were carved not with pattern or symbol, but with long, sweeping curves, like the rings found inside the oldest of trees. Here, the castle did not shimmer or whisper. It rested. It remembered without movement. At the center stood a pool, shallow, still, and perfectly round. It held no water, yet its surface gleamed. Not with reflection, but with depth. Looking into it, one did not see the ceiling above. One saw a sky, not the present sky, but skies that had passed. The memory of storms. The quiet of dawns. The weight of dusk. The traveler knelt beside the pool. Their ribbon floated gently down beside them, then came to rest. From their pocket, they drew a small, flat stone, pale gray, with a single stripe of white. It was nothing, and it was everything. A keepsake from a stream they could no longer name, found long before they had known they were seeking anything at all. They had carried it without reason. Now, it felt heavy. With a breath that did not tremble, the traveler placed the stone into the pool. It did not sink. It did not ripple. But light rose up, not from the pool, but from the walls. The carvings, once merely curves, now glowed in gentle hues. Amber, lavender, cloud silver. As if the very grain of time had been revealed. Then, a sound. Not loud. Just enough to lift the hair on one's arms. A voice, not speaking, but remembered. Not words. Just the shape of comfort. The traveler closed their eyes. And for a moment, it felt as though the entire room were an embrace. Not tight. Not clinging. Just present. Known. The weight of having been waited for, and welcomed. When they stood again, the feather glowed in their palm. A new passage had opened, low and curved, leading deeper still. The new passage was narrow, but not confining. It curved like a question asked long ago and left unanswered, not forgotten, only waiting. The walls here were darker, smoother, cool to the touch like river stone beneath shade. The traveler walked slowly, for there was no path of light this time, only the faint glow of the feather and the soft sound of breath, not their own, but the castle's, steady and slow. This place had no alcoves. No carvings. But etched into the air itself was a presence, gentle, but full. It was the feeling of things that had been left behind with care, names not spoken aloud, moments set gently aside, not out of pain but reverence. And though the traveler had said nothing since entering the castle, this space seemed to know them. Not their name. Not their story. But their shape, the outline of their wonder, the weight of their pauses, the rhythm of their silent questions. It met them, not with answers, but with stillness. With welcome. At the end of the passage, a door appeared. It was not stone, nor wood, but woven, strands of silver and dusk blue thread, braided with patience. The traveler reached toward it, and as their fingers touched the edge, the fabric unwound itself, like a ribbon loosening from a gift never unwrapped. Beyond it, the room was dim and round, with a single pedestal at its center. Resting atop it, untouched by dust or time, was a book, its cover soft and colorless, like something dreamed rather than made. The traveler stepped forward. And the book opened, not from touch, but recognition. The book had no pages. Not in the way one might expect. When the traveler leaned closer, they found only light, soft, pale, and quietly turning in place, like fog warmed by early sunlight. It shifted beneath their gaze, becoming shapes, then movement, then memory, not their memories, but ones the castle itself seemed to recall. A child's laugh. The brushing of hair in an upstairs chamber. A hand placing a single acorn on a windowsill. A lullaby hummed without words. Each moment played for only a breath, then melted back into light. The traveler felt no urgency to understand. Only the wish to watch. The feather in their hand pulsed gently, matching the rhythm of the book. Not an instruction, a harmony. Then, something new formed. An image, not from the past, but from the present. The traveler themselves, seated just as they were, gazing into the book. But around them, other shapes appeared. Not people. Not quite. Impressions. Silhouettes. The presence of others who had sat where they now sat, across years, across silences, each one watching the book and adding to its quiet brightness. The traveler closed their eyes. And in that moment, the book grew still. Not shut, just quiet. Resting again. A soundless message lingered in the air. You are part of the remembering now. They bowed their head once, as one does before something sacred, and stepped back. The book did not vanish. It simply folded itself into stillness, as though going back to sleep. Behind them, a final hallway opened, lined with soft petals that drifted down from nowhere, glowing faintly as they touched the floor. The end was near. But endings in this place were not goodbyes. Only another form of welcome. The petals led the traveler into the softest room of all, a garden, though no sun touched it. The ceiling above was not stone, nor wood, nor stars, but a dome of mist, gently glowing, ever shifting in its quiet brightness. It gave the feeling of sky without truly being one, as if the castle, in remembering the world above, had woven its own dream of open air. The garden's floor was warm earth, scattered with moss and small, silvery leaves that chimed when brushed. Flowers grew in clusters, their colors muted as moonlight, their scents as faint as memory. They did not bloom for display, nor for bees. They bloomed for something deeper, perhaps for the castle itself. The traveler stepped between the blossoms, careful not to disturb their peace. In the center stood a stone bench, shaped like a crescent moon. Upon it lay a bundle wrapped in cloth so sheer it might have been woven from breath. Inside it, the traveler knew without opening, was a second ribbon, identical to their own. And so they sat, unfolding the cloth with reverence, and took the ribbon in their hand. The two lengths twined themselves together, not by force, but by recognition, as if long parted, and quietly joyful to meet again. Around the garden, wind stirred, not from any source, but from within the stone itself, rising softly in spirals of warmth. The traveler leaned back on the bench, gaze lifted to the dome of mist, now slowly parting. Not outward, but inward. And through that parting, they saw the heart of the castle at last. It was not a throne room. Not a vault, nor sanctum. It was smaller than all the rest, just large enough for a single breath to fill it. The traveler entered not by steps, but by stillness. The doorway welcomed them like a lullaby, and within, the chamber pulsed like a heartbeat too slow to measure. There was no light, yet nothing was hidden. The walls were shaped like listening. The floor curved upward at the edges, as though the room itself were cradling what it held. And what it held, was sleep. Not death. Not oblivion. But true rest, the kind that takes centuries to complete. In the center of the room was a single spiral of stone, rising like the unfurling of a fern. Upon it rested a sphere, no larger than a curled hand. It glowed faintly, but not with flame. With peace. The feather, still held by the traveler, shivered once. And then melted into light. Its glow drifted upward, then downward, drawn to the sphere. As it touched the surface, the sphere pulsed gently, not brighter, but deeper, as though something inside had turned slightly in its dreaming. The traveler felt no need to speak. They understood. The castle had always been waiting. Not for rescue. Not for return. But for a moment of being seen. And now that moment had come. The two ribbons, still twined, floated beside the traveler, then softly settled onto the stone like a crown of wind. And the traveler sat down on the floor. The breath of the castle slowed again. Not ending. Just returning. The mist in the garden ceased its curling. The bells far above gave one last breath of sound, like the hush of wind through feathers. And the sky, that whispering sky above it all, lowered once more, not to listen, but to sleep. And the castle, long forgotten by the world, but never by time, dreamed on. Softly. In a quiet field hidden between hills, a pool reflects the moon even on cloudy nights, but when one traveler arrives, the reflection begins to ripple, and something ancient begins to wake. There was a meadow, far from towns, far from roads, where the moon always seemed to pause. It lay hidden in the fold of two blue hills, wrapped in quiet, wrapped in mist. Grass there grew silver, not green, and the flowers glowed faintly even on cloudy nights, not because of magic, but because of memory. The land, it was said, remembered the light it once held, and did not let it go. At the meadow's center, a pool rested, shallow, still, and perfectly round. It was known only to a few as the moon's reflection, for every night, no matter the weather, the full moon appeared upon its surface. Even when the sky held clouds, or rain, or nothing at all, the moon was there in the pool, pale and unblinking. No one quite knew why. But one summer evening, a traveler came, walking softly through the tall silver grass, guided not by stars, but by a feeling, as though something quiet had called them, not with words, but with longing. They reached the edge of the pool just as the sky deepened into indigo. Above, no moon could be seen, only a stretch of dim cloud. But in the pool, it was there. Bright, round, whole. The traveler knelt and gazed into the surface. Then blinked, for the moon within the pool shimmered. Not with movement, but with change. A single ripple had formed, yet no wind stirred. And unlike every ripple in every pond, ever made by breeze or drop or thought, this one did not fade. It circled once. Then again. Then again. As though something beneath the surface was breathing. The traveler did not draw back. They leaned closer. The ripple circled slowly, like a lullaby played in water. It did not widen. It did not vanish. It remained, delicate, even, steady. And now, there was sound. Not loud. Not voice. But a murmur beneath the silence, like a hush spoken between dreams. A whisper made not of words, but of meaning. The traveler placed a hand to the grass. It was soft and dry. No wind moved the air. Yet the ripple grew stronger, not outward, but inward, a spiral pulling gently toward the center of the pool. The reflected moon pulsed once, as if nodding. The traveler leaned closer. And for a moment, only a moment, their own reflection was gone. The pool held only the moon, and something else. A shadow. A faint shape, deep below the mirrored surface, curved like the crescent edge of a shell. It moved slowly, gently, like something dreaming. Then the whisper rose again. This time, it held a pattern, a lull in the sound, followed by 3 notes no louder than thought. It was not music. It was invitation. And the ripple shimmered brighter. The travelers sat back slowly, but their gaze never left the pool. In their bag was a bundle, soft cloth, bound with string, holding tokens from years past. Stones, buttons, a folded leaf. They reached inside and took the smallest object, a ring of braided grass, dried but intact. It had been made long ago, for no reason except comfort. They placed it gently into the pool. It did not sink. It did not float. It simply rested. And the ripple accepted it. A new sound stirred, faint, like the beginning of a bell's song, far, far away. The clouded sky above began to thin, and for the first time, the real moon broke through. Yet still, the moon in the pool was brighter. The traveler whispered nothing. But the grass at their side leaned gently toward the water. The pool was listening. The moon above had risen fully now, its pale light spilling across the meadow like milk poured onto silk. The grass shimmered faintly, each blade touched with silver, bending toward the traveler as though drawn by something older than gravity, something softer. And where the grass leaned, a path slowly revealed itself, not worn, not pressed, but outlined in brightness. The traveler stood. The ring they had placed in the water had vanished, not sunk, not washed away, but gently, absorbed. The ripple that had once circled still pulsed at the heart of the pool, steady as a heartbeat too slow for waking life. The moon's reflection had begun to change again, not dimming, but deepening, as though it now looked upward at something more than sky. Without a sound, the traveler stepped away from the pool and onto the path. Each step bent the grass slightly, but the blades rose again after their passing, as if unwilling to hold the shape of footsteps for long. They walked slowly, not with hesitation, but with reverence, as one might approach a sleeping animal too lovely to disturb. The ribbon tied to their wrist fluttered once, then quieted, not lifeless, only listening. Ahead, the path led to a ring of stones, 5 large, flat, and half sunken into the earth, as if placed not by hands but by intention. They formed a circle with no center, and within them, the grass was shorter, softer, moon-pale and still. The traveler entered the circle and paused. There, resting on the innermost stone, was a bowl, shallow, carved from something smooth and gray, shaped like the curve of a crescent moon. And in it, lay water. But no reflection. Only depth. The water in the bowl did not reflect the moon, nor the stars, nor the traveler's face. It did not shimmer, did not shift. And yet, it was alive. The traveler knelt beside the stone, careful not to disturb the grass within the circle. The silence here was different from the stillness of the meadow. It was rounder, warmer, as though the air had thickened slightly to hold the shape of memory. They gazed into the bowl. At first, they saw nothing. Just water, dark and unblinking. But slowly, gently, something began to change. Not the surface, but within. Shapes stirred below, like silk drifting in a dream. A curl, a flicker, a turn, then, an image. Not of a person, nor of a place. But a moment. A tiny boat, rocking softly on still water. A voice, not heard, but known, humming something that had no words. A child's hand trailing in the lake, scattering moonlight like petals. It was not a memory the traveler recognized as their own, and yet, their heart ached as if it were. The water trembled. The image shifted. A hill, glowing with fireflies. A slow dance in fog. A stone carried in a pocket for years. Things that had not happened, or perhaps had, in another life. The traveler closed their eyes. When they opened them again, the bowl was still. Empty of image, full of depth. The moon above had moved slightly in the sky, not far, but enough to shift the light across the stone ring. The bowl's surface caught the light for one breath. And then released a single drop. It fell, not downward, but up, into the night air, and vanished. Somewhere, the pool behind them sighed. And the grass bent once more, guiding the traveler toward the next place. The traveler rose once more, the bowl behind them now silent, its surface still as glass forgotten on a windowsill. The grass inside the circle rustled gently, though there was no wind. Not a breeze. Not a stir. And yet the sound was there, soft, like pages turning in another room. The path of silver grass reappeared. Not ahead. But to the side. With a calm breath, the traveler followed. This time, the trail did not lead far. Only a dozen steps or so before it opened into a small hollow, sunken into the meadow like the memory of an old footprint. At its center sat a cluster of stones, not arranged, not carved, only present. Smooth, oval, pale as river-washed bone. They rested in silence, yet not in stillness. They felt, attentive. The traveler stepped closer. As they did, the ribbon at their wrist lifted slightly, as if sensing a shift. The air in the hollow was different, not colder, not warmer, but heavier, like the air that surrounds a sleeping creature. The stones shimmered faintly, not with light, but with presence. And when the traveler sat among them, they felt the quiet gather like a circle of arms. They did not speak. Instead, they closed their eyes. And in that hush, something deeper than sound responded. Not a voice. Not even a thought. But a knowing. The stones had listened. Long ago. To rain. To feet. To laughter. To tears. And they remembered. The traveler let their breath grow slow. The earth beneath them pulsed softly, like the rhythm of wind in tall grass, and the traveler understood. Here, there were no questions. Only the comfort of being heard. Night deepened. The traveler opened their eyes again and found the meadow changed, not in shape, but in silence. The sky above was cloudless now, wide and black, yet full of a softness that felt close to touch. No stars were visible. No constellations. Only the moon remained, glowing with a quiet intensity, like a breath that has chosen to stay. The path appeared once more. This time it led down. Just beyond the listening stones, the ground sloped gently, into a depression lined with ferns that glowed like ghostly lace. At the center, another pool awaited, smaller than the first, yet somehow older. Its surface was nearly invisible, blending with the sky above, so still it could not be told apart from shadow. But when the traveler reached its edge, they saw them. The stars. Not above. Below. In the water, where there had been none before, constellations pulsed faintly. Shapes moved, slow, serene, and unfamiliar. Not the stars of any known sky, but those of forgotten heavens. The feathered curve of a wing. A sleeping eye. A circle made of breath. The traveler knelt once more. Their hand hovered above the surface, unsure whether to touch. But the water moved first. A single ripple formed, delicate, inward, spiraling toward the center. And then, a sound. One not heard but felt. A hum so deep it stirred the soil beneath their knees. And the moon's reflection, still present, blinked. Not dimmed. Not vanished. Just blinked. As though it were not reflection at all, but something looking back. The traveler did not flinch. They only lowered their hand. And when they touched the pool, the stars within it moved, like birds in slow flight, rearranging themselves into a spiral of light. The moon shimmered again. And the sky, above, below, within, began to breathe. The spiral of stars within the pool turned slowly, not hurried, not hesitant, as if it had waited centuries just to begin moving again. The traveler watched without blinking, the world behind them fading into soft nothingness. There was no edge to the moment. No boundary between breath and stillness. The moon's reflection glowed gently at the spiral center, now brighter than before, not dazzling, but whole, full of something wordless. The longer the traveler looked, the more they felt it, a melody, not made of notes, but of motion. The spiral was singing. Not to the ears. To the memory of the soul. It was a lullaby for something ancient, not sorrowful, but full of longing so gentle it felt like the pause between falling asleep and dreaming. The traveler lowered both hands to the edge of the water. Not to change it. Only to listen better. At their touch, the spiral slowed, folding into itself like petals at dusk. The stars dimmed, not from loss, but from peace. The ripple returned, one final time, spreading outward instead of inward, and with it, a warmth rose from the pool, curling into the air like steam kissed by moonlight. It brushed the traveler's cheek. And then, there was a voice. Not loud. Not clear. But kind. Just one word. Not spoken, not written, only given. A name. Not the traveler's name in this life, but the one they had carried before the first forgetting. A name the stars still knew. Their eyes shimmered, and the pool grew still. The traveler sat quietly beside the water, the name still echoing softly inside them, not as sound, but as shape, as warmth. There was no need to speak it. It had already been heard. The meadow, the moon, the spiral of stars, they had always known. When the pool grew still again, the light did not vanish. It folded inward, like hands drawing closed around something small and precious. The moon's reflection blinked once more, slowly, fondly, and then faded from the water. But not from the sky. Above, it remained, watching gently, as if smiling without form. The traveler stood, and the silver grass once more leaned to show the way. This time, the path was narrower, almost shy, winding through low-growing flowers that gave off no scent, only a soft hum, like lullabies held within petals. It ended at a rise in the land, a small hill, round and smooth, as though shaped by sleeping giants. At its center was a circle of stones, much smaller than before, each no larger than a folded palm. On every stone, a mark. No two alike. Spirals, dots, waves, tiny constellations. The traveler knew without knowing, these were wishes. Not spoken aloud. Not cast like coins or shouted to stars. But quiet ones. Kept close. Planted like seeds. They knelt beside the circle and reached into their coat. Inside, wrapped in soft cloth, was a tiny object, an old button from a coat no longer worn, with a thread still clinging to it. It had meant nothing once. But over the years, it had become something else, the memory of a memory, carried without purpose until it grew full of meaning. They placed it on the ground beside a blank stone. The earth beneath it shimmered once. And the stone marked itself. Another wish, now at rest. The traveler bowed their head. And the meadow exhaled. The hill was silent after the wish was placed. The stones did not move, the flowers did not bloom, and yet everything had changed, as though a breath long held by the earth had been released, tenderly, back into the air. The traveler remained still. They did not rise, nor speak, but felt the shift settle around them like a blanket drawn up by unseen hands. The silver grass no longer leaned in a single direction. It moved now with its own rhythm, slow and uncertain, as if deciding what to become next. And then, a path appeared. Not ahead. Not behind. But downward. Into the hill. Where there had only been soil and root, a narrow opening had unfolded, a soft tunnel lined with roots, stones, and threads of silver light that pulsed like the beat of a resting heart. The traveler entered without fear. The ribbon at their wrist floated once, gently, then tucked itself quietly against their sleeve, content to be still. The tunnel did not lead far. It opened into a cavern, round and low, filled with a pale glow that came from nowhere at all. The floor was covered in fine moss, and at its center, the shape. A great dome of crystal, translucent and breathing faintly with light. And inside the dome, sky. Real sky. Endless, soft, and filled with stars that no longer burned above. A sky that had been hidden, kept safe beneath the world. Not forgotten. Only resting. The traveler approached slowly. And as they reached the dome, the stars within it stirred. One by one, they blinked back into light. The stars beneath the dome shimmered like lullabies with no beginning, no end, just warmth in motion, flickering with memory. They did not gleam like cold fire. Their light was gentler than flame, softer than candle glow. It was light that had once guided someone home, waited quietly by a cradle, or lingered in the folds of an old scarf. The traveler sat beside the crystal dome. They placed both hands upon it. It was neither warm nor cold, but it welcomed their touch, not with movement, but with recognition. Light within the sky dome turned slowly, and as it did, it carried images, moments from lives never lived, dreams not dreamt, names never spoken aloud. Each one glowed for a heartbeat, then faded, like a smile that does not need to linger to be felt. One star near the center pulsed brighter than the others. The traveler leaned closer. And saw themselves. Not as they were, but as they had been before, remembering, walking a different path, perhaps, with a different face, beneath a younger sky. The image smiled. Not a reflection. Not a memory. But a greeting. A gesture that said, "You've returned." And the traveler smiled back. Around them, the cavern began to dim, not into shadow, but into peace. The stars no longer pulsed quickly. Their light slowed, deepened, softened into a glow like the last light before sleep. And one by one, the stars folded inward. Not disappearing. Only returning. The dome exhaled, and the sky within it stilled. The traveler closed their eyes and placed their forehead gently against the crystal, offering no request, no question. Only gratitude. The ribbon at their wrist shimmered once. Then went still. And behind them, a soft sound, like wind turning a page. The final path had opened. The traveler rose without hurry. Behind them, the sky and the crystal dome gave one last shimmer, then settled into stillness, like breath released into silence. The cavern did not darken, nor fade. It simply waited, content in its remembering. The soft sound they had heard, that page turn of air, had come from the far side of the chamber, where now a doorway stood. Not carved. Not constructed. It was made of fog, shaped into an arch that drifted just above the moss, its edges curling and smoothing like thought. They approached it. The moment they stepped through, the world changed, but not suddenly. No jolt, no tumble. Just a soft unfolding, like cloth being drawn back from something it has always meant to reveal. They were once again in the meadow. But not where they had entered. This part was quieter. Even the silver grass grew more slowly here, and the moon, still bright in the sky, looked larger, closer, as though it had lowered itself to meet them. The air was full of hush. A soft, steady hush. Like the sound of many gentle voices that had chosen not to speak, but to stay. Ahead was the pool. The first pool. its surface smooth again, untouched, as if no ripple had ever formed. But now, something had changed. In the center of the pool, floating above the water, not quite touching it, was a small object. Pale. Weightless. Spinning slowly. The traveler approached. It was the ring of braided grass they had left behind. Whole once more. But glowing faintly, as if it now carried starlight within its tiny shape. And beside it, another ripple began. The last one. The ripple moved outward from the floating ring, slow and bright, like light passing through silk. It circled once. Then again. Then again. But this time, it did not stop. It reached the edge of the pool, and continued. Across the grass. Across the stones. Across the very surface of the meadow itself. The moon above shone fuller now, casting no shadow. Not brighter, only nearer. The traveler looked up, and for the first time, the moon blinked. Not as reflection. Not as symbol. But as itself. A quiet eye, ancient and kind, meeting the traveler's gaze without sound. And then, it smiled. Not with a mouth. Not with motion. But with light. A light that washed over the meadow like a soft tide, neither hot nor cold, only full of rest. The stones, the flowers, the pools, the paths, all pulsed once, then breathed outward, as if the meadow itself had sighed in contentment. The traveler stood at the edge of the pool. The braided ring rose into their hands. Its glow faded. Not gone, simply returned to its place inside them. The ribbon at their wrist untied itself, drifted once into the air, and gently laid itself upon the water. It sank without sound. And the pool grew still. No more ripples. No more light. Only a perfect moon reflected there, and this time, it matched the one above. Whole. The traveler turned back through the grass, no longer following a path, but being one. And as they walked, the meadow slowly folded itself inward, not vanishing, not ending. Only, resting. Somewhere behind the sky, a lullaby continued without melody. A song not meant to be sung, only felt. The traveler reached the edge of the hills, where the world grew lighter. And then, like a thought released from a long-held breath, they were gone. And the moon, soft and silver, remembered them. Always. In a village watched over by mirrors, reflections hold memories instead of faces. When a quiet stranger returns, the glass begins to breathe, and forgotten truths stir gently into light. There once was a village where no doors had locks, and no windows had curtains. Not because the people were careless, or fearless, but because they had mirrors. And the mirrors watched over everything. They hung not only on walls, but from trees, in the crooks of branches, along the fences and wells and gateposts. Some were large, tall as doorways. Some were no bigger than a silver spoon. They did not shine unnaturally, nor speak, nor blink. But they breathed. Not visibly. Not with fog or steam. But with presence. Each mirror held more than reflection. They held echoes, of moments, of thoughts, of things that almost happened. The villagers had long learned not to stare too long. A glance was enough. A second longer, and the mirror might show something that wasn't there, yet felt familiar. A child not yet born. A road not yet walked. A hand that once held theirs but now was elsewhere. It was not frightening. Only humbling. Most of the villagers had grown up with the mirrors, and they treated them like wind, always there, always moving gently, never fully understood. When passing one, they would bow slightly. Not out of fear, but respect. One autumn evening, when the sky had grown soft with cloud and the leaves rustled like pages, a stranger arrived. She wore a blue coat with no buttons, and her hair was the color of cooled embers. She carried a walking stick that made no sound, and around her wrist hung a charm, not silver, not gold, but glass. She paused before the village gate. And the mirrors all turned, not their glass, but their attention. A quiet shimmer passed through the trees. And the stranger stepped inside. The stranger walked quietly through the village, her boots leaving no imprint on the mossy stone. Lanterns flickered in windows, though no one came out. The village was not unfriendly, only watchful. The wind moved through the trees with long, slow sighs, and the mirrors trembled slightly in their frames, as though whispering among themselves. She paused at the edge of the square, where an old well stood surrounded by a ring of polished stones. Above it, hanging from an arched iron arm, was a mirror. It was oval, rimmed in bronze, and older than any other in sight. Its surface was soft with age, more like still water than glass, and though it reflected clearly, it held a glow, as if the light inside it came from another sky. The stranger stepped closer. She did not look into it directly. Not yet. She bowed her head gently, as the villagers did, and let the quiet settle around her. The charm at her wrist gave a faint pulse of color, like moonlight sliding across clear water. Then, she raised her eyes. The mirror was still. And then, it blinked. Not with eyes. Not with lids. But with memory. Her reflection shifted. For a breath, it was no longer her, not exactly. It was her face, but younger. Not quite as tall. Wearing a scarf with 3 gold threads. A child's version, not quite forgotten, not quite remembered. The mirror knew her. It had seen her before. Though she had never stepped foot in the village. A ripple passed through the image. Not of time. Of understanding. She reached out with one hand and touched the edge of the frame. The metal warmed beneath her fingers. And the mirror spoke. Not aloud. Not in words. But in the language of light. One pulse. Then 2. And a feeling bloomed in her chest, soft and round and full of stillness. The mirror remembered her name. But it would not speak it. It waited for her to remember it herself. After the mirror by the well stilled its light, the stranger bowed once more. She turned away slowly, her steps soft on the cobbled square. The villagers had not shown themselves, but the wind carried the distant sound of a lullaby, one not sung, only remembered, passed from shutter to shutter like an old perfume. She let the sound guide her. Down a narrow lane between two quiet cottages, the path narrowed. Ivy draped low from windowsills, and thin-leaved vines curled around fence posts, dancing faintly in the dusk. But here, something was different. The mirrors along this lane did not shimmer. They did not breathe. They turned away. Some tilted down, showing only cobble and toe. Others leaned toward the walls, reflecting nothing but stone. One hung completely backwards, its wooden back bare and silent. They were not broken. Only closed. The stranger paused. She touched her charm, the glass circle at her wrist, and it flickered once with pale green. She stepped forward. Each pace down the lane brought a hush, thicker than before. Not unfriendly. Just watchful. The sort of hush a room holds when it remembers a long-ago sorrow. At the end of the lane stood a house of faded blue timber, small and sloping gently to the left. Its windows held no mirrors. Its steps were swept clean. But above the door, just beneath the roof's edge, hung a mirror shaped like a teardrop. It faced her. The only one in the lane that dared to. Its glass was dark. Not black. Not deep. But full, like a night sky just before the stars begin. She raised her eyes to it. And the mirror breathed in. The mirror above the door exhaled once, not as wind, but as a soft shimmer in the air. The traveler felt it pass over her skin like mist, not cold, but stirring. It carried no scent, yet it reminded her of something distant, the hush of walking alone through snow, the stillness before an old truth is told. The door creaked open. No hand had touched it. No key had turned. It simply opened, slowly and without pride, as though the house had made up its mind. She stepped inside. The floor was wood, pale and worn. The walls were lined with shelves, not of books, but of mirrors. Dozens of them, perhaps hundreds, all different shapes and sizes. None of them hung. They leaned. Against walls, upon tables, within alcoves. Some were polished bright. Others blurred with time. A few shimmered softly in the corners of the room, catching light that wasn't there. The air was warm. Not with fire. With memory. She walked past a round mirror nestled in a velvet cloth. It showed a winter she had never lived, a frozen pond, a pair of mittens, the feeling of her name spoken from a mouth she'd never known. She passed another, square, cracked in one corner. It showed a cottage by the sea. Not this sea. Another. With cliffs that leaned like bowed shoulders and gulls that sang without reason. None of the mirrors startled her. They were not trying to tell her who she had been. They were asking whether she still wanted to become it. At the far end of the room, on a low wooden stand, lay a single mirror with a cloth draped over it. The air around it pulsed. She reached for the cloth. Her charm flashed once, bright and clear. Then stilled. The cloth lifted like breath. And the mirror beneath it was not glass at all, but water. Beneath the cloth, the mirror glistened, not with light, but with stillness. It was not a surface meant to show a face. It was not polished or framed. It was not fixed to the table. It simply was. A pool. Shallow, round, no deeper than the palm of a hand, and yet, the moment the traveler looked into it, the room around her faded. There was no dizziness. No rush. Just a soft unraveling. The way an old coat slips from the shoulders without being pulled. The mirrors on the walls no longer flickered. The shelves no longer seemed to hold weight. All that remained was her, and the water. At first, it reflected nothing. Not the ceiling, not her hands, not her face. But after a moment, it shimmered. Then stirred. And then, without light, without color, it remembered. The mirror did not show scenes, like the others. It gave no image. Instead, it gave feeling. The shape of a memory. The temperature of a choice. A wind that had never touched her skin but somehow lived in her chest. Laughter that echoed as though heard once, long ago, on a hill beneath a violet sky. The traveler placed her hand just above the surface. She did not touch it. She didn't need to. A pulse passed upward, soft, rhythmic, like the heartbeat of water. And in that rhythm came the truth. This mirror did not show who she had been. It showed what she had meant. To someone. Somewhere. Sometime. Even now. Tears did not fall. But the feeling that comes just before them settled behind her eyes. Her charm warmed once more. And the pool, after a final shimmer, stilled. The house exhaled again, the sound of wood settling, of walls remembering that they are only here to hold. And the traveler knew. It was time to return outside. The mirrors had more to say. The door of the house stood open when she turned. No wind had moved it. It had opened in silence, just as before, but now the silence felt different. Not watchful, but trusting. The traveler stepped out. The lane was still empty. The air was thick with twilight. And the mirrors, those that had turned away, had now angled themselves toward her. Not fully. Just enough to say we see you now. The sky above was gathering into blue-gray, and somewhere to the west, the bellflowers in the gardens began to chime softly in their sleep. No bell had rung in the village. But everyone had heard the tone. It meant something old had stirred. She followed the path back toward the square, her pace steady, the glass charm at her wrist now glowing with a low, steady hum. Not loud. Just present. Like the feeling of being watched by something that wishes only good. At the far end of the square stood a new mirror. It hadn't been there before. It stood taller than a person, framed in wood as pale as drifted snow, with silver edging that shimmered like the inside of a shell. It leaned ever so slightly forward, not in warning, but in invitation. The traveler stepped before it. It did not show her face. It showed a question. Not in words. Not in symbols. But in silence. And in that silence, she understood, this mirror would not pretend. It would not soften. It would not bend to comfort. It would show her the one thing none of the others could. What she had turned away from. She breathed in. And the mirror breathed back. The reflection came slowly, shaped like fog becoming form. And there, in the center, stood someone. Not her. But the version of her who had stayed. The one who had chosen not to leave the place where the first mirror had once waited. The one who had never forgotten her name. The figure in the tall mirror was not made of glass. It was not illusion. It breathed, not with lungs, but with presence. She stood in a room not unlike the one the traveler had just left. Same curved walls. Same soft shelves. But the light was different. It glowed not with memory, but with intention. The other her did not smile. But she did not turn away. She reached forward, her hand mirroring the traveler's exactly, but not at the same moment. There was a delay, small but certain, like someone who recognizes an echo before it returns. In her eyes was the weight of 1,000 quiet choices, the ones too small to mark but too real to forget. This was the version of herself that had said yes. To what, the traveler still didn't know. But she could feel it in her chest, the weight of the path not taken, and the warmth of what had grown there in her absence. Then, from deep within the village, a shimmer passed through the mirrors. Not a wind. Not a sound. A soft shift, like a sigh held in stone. And the tall mirror in front of her bowed slightly. Not the glass, the frame. As though the mirror itself had bent in greeting. Behind her, footsteps. But not toward her. Beside her. Villagers had emerged. Quietly. Softly. Some stood at doorways. Others knelt in gardens. A few gathered in the square, gazing not at her, but into the mirrors that surrounded them. Each one looking for the piece of themselves they had once handed to the glass. And the traveler knew, this moment had happened before. And now, it had returned. Not for answers, but for remembering. The shimmer passed again, stronger now, threading through rooftops and stones, drawing silver veins through the village paths. The mirrors sang without sound, each one humming a different memory, overlapping like waves that never crashed. And then, the oldest mirror opened. Not with hinges. With breath. It stood beneath a great oak at the northern edge of the village, a tree older than the fences, older than the walls. Its branches arched over the path like the ribs of a cathedral, and in its bark, the mirror had grown. Not placed. Not framed. But grown, as though the village had not built it, but waited for it. It was wide, tall, and perfectly still. No shimmer. No glow. Just a quiet, clear depth. The traveler turned her steps toward it. The villagers did not follow. They stood back, not in fear, but in reverence, as though the path now belonged only to her. The charm at her wrist had gone still, the light within it paused, held gently in its last breath. When she reached the tree, she paused. And the mirror breathed her in. Her reflection appeared, not altered, not reversed. Simply, true. And then it shifted. Behind her, within the glass, a landscape emerged. Not the village. A hill. A child. A single silver thread tied to a wrist. A place where the first mirror had waited in a room of sun-washed stone, quiet and dust-speckled, watching a girl who never knew it had watched her grow. The traveler pressed her hand to the mirror's surface. The bark did not feel like wood. It felt like skin. Alive. And the moment her fingers touched the glass, she remembered. Not her name. That had come earlier. She remembered why she had left. And what had called her back. Not a place. Not a face. But a promise. Soft as a mirror's sigh. She did not remember the promise with her mind. She remembered it with her hands. The way they had once pressed against another's. The feel of smooth stone under fingertips. The warmth of a circle drawn on a wooden floor. A gesture, repeated, not for magic, but for remembering. A binding made without paper, sealed without words. And the promise had waited. Not in anger. Not in loss. Only in stillness. She stood before the mirror in the tree, hand resting lightly against its breathing surface, and the reflection within no longer showed the hill. It now held only light. Not brightness. But fullness. The light of something returned to its shape after years apart. The village held its breath. Behind her, the mirrors leaned inward. From every eave, every gate, every fence post, the glass tilted slightly, as though drawn toward the center of a quiet circle that had taken lifetimes to close. The traveler closed her eyes.